it's just a lot of organizing and scheduling, and it's really time consuming. And then you've got the personalities, and then it's like, can you interact with other people well enough to make to make them play your music for little or no, most of the time it's been no money, and it's just like, what is their motivation, what is their incentive? And you just like, can you be that charming person, or is the music good enough, or whatever? But ultimately to have a band is it's a lot of work.
Hi, this is Tom for Ghost Cult, and I'm delighted to be joined by Bär McKinnon, formerly of Mr. Bungle and of, I was going to say now of Umlaut, but actually you've had Umlaut for, I would say, longer than you were in Mr. Bungle. Is that right to say? I guess that's right at this point. Umlaut's been going for quite a while. 20 years?
Yeah, I don't know. It's been very off and on.
Yeah, okay.
So there's no kind of, that's why I never really quite put a number on these things, and I kind of get a little bit embarrassed by the numbers.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, because it's sort of, there's an implication I feel with that. Oh yeah, you guys must have done this. You must have gone there. Must have done that, and it's not the case. As maybe it should be. So that's fine.
That's a fair perspective.
But yes.
Nonetheless, you are going to be releasing your latest album, Desolë, on Overdrive Records. Now, is it correct to say that it's July the 25th? Is that the date?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And the first thing I should say before we get into any questions, I love the album. I think it's tremendous. I was, so I'm currently in Oxford at the moment, but I kind of spend my time going between Glasgow and Oxford, which is about 350 miles or 500 kilometers if you prefer. And on the last drive that I had, I was listening to Desolë, and like, I think the whole album's great, and we can get into particular parts of it, but in particular for me, although I'm not great with remembering the names of the tracks, the Tarnished Legacy, the first track, and STFU, I love these songs so much. So it's like I listened to the album, and then I was just repeatedly listening to those two tracks and singing along, like at full volume. And I was thinking, anyone that's driving past me that's seeing me like shouting along to these songs might think I look quite weird, but that's
awesome. Thank you.
It's a great album.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's funny because we didn't know where to put the Tarnished Legacy for a minute. It was kind of like, it was sort of the one that almost was kind of an oddball, I guess, amongst the rest of it to our minds. But yeah, that's huge. That's a huge compliment, and I'm honored that, because I would hope that would be the case for people, that they go like, oh, these are really, people would really be able to sink their teeth into them and get that enjoyment out of them. That's kind of that was sort of the point in a way. Was just like, just do some. Anyway, I guess in some songwriting stage of things, I hit on a few things that I was just like, wow. I almost was having these kind of out of body things, going like, wow, I can hear this on a larger scale or stage or something. There was like, and anyway, I've had the side thing. I'll try to be quick about this, but I've also had like this day job for several years where people would say to me, why don't you just write a hit? Or they'd say, an old friend would say something like, why don't you just do a song like a Faith No More song that, sorry to drop that name right out of the gate, but like where it's just like the bass is just playing like one note or something. And not that those songs are that necessarily, but I think on some level I like catchy songs. I like things that aren't kind of messing around. They just kind of get right to the point and give you the stuff that you love about it. Like, so that's kind of what's going on with those two songs in a way.
Well, that's also I think in terms of the album as a whole, because there are all kinds of other highlights for me. That's an element that I really appreciate, is that you've got this eclectic, varied instrumentation and writing, like you'll jump from one part into another, and which, not to make it sound like it's fragmented, like it goes together very nicely, but it's like, I guess, if we're going to go back to Mr. Bungle, and I know that from listening to you doing interviews, you tend to downplay your role, but I have the feeling that once it was towards the end, like with the California time, you were more involved with the songwriting. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, they were encouraging me more and more. It's funny, I used to refer to him, and Trevor used to get the shits with me because I'd be like, hey, what are you guys doing, or this or that. So in my language, I would sort of be distancing myself, or I felt like a little bit like I wasn't maybe in the club because I wasn't there from, the earliest days. And he would, I remember one time he sent, I think it was around the Disco Volante era. He was like, he sent me like a demo of like, or some of the ideas that were going around before the album had gotten underway. And the title of on the cassette, if you was just like, "You're in this fucking band." So, and they would sort of encourage me. We went along, because they would just try to support me and instead of just being this like, this just a horn player or something.
Yeah. Because I think that for people who listen to this, I think, I don't know if you would agree with this, it feels to me like this somehow feels a little bit like it has more in common with California than other Umlaut releases that you've done. Yeah. And I think like that dimension that Mr. Bungle had of jumping from one part to another and it making sense is something that you've got here with Desolë. And it also has that kind of like positive summary feeling, but it's in a way that's very surreal and bizarre, which I think is part of what so many people, myself included, loved about Mr. Bungle, particularly that latter period where it was like, oh, this is like Beach Boys music, but it's Beach Boys music that's on peyote and is drunk and hanging upside down.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate that. Thank you. Because again, I think people here have heard from me, and I've probably said it a few times. I'm not trying to give any. Actually, I was sort of realizing like some of this chaotic stuff on the walls behind me. I'm like, this is probably somebody going like, why is that foam thing crooked or whatever? And anyway, I'm constantly trying to fix these damn things up, and then and then they fail a little bit, but back to the music, it's like on some level, it's like maybe it's just been this thing of me, just this like I really appreciate bands that are in earnest and doing things and take themselves very seriously, and and aren't kind of messing around with the listener too much. Not to say that I don't like a bit of a tangent. God knows I speak in tangents really, but it's I don't know. I guess on some levels, it's like I wanted to do some songs. I want them to just sound like as serious as a heart attack, as like where the listener might come away going like, "Oh my God, what happened to him? And what did he go through? And is it real, or is he just doing a character and whatever?" And so I there was so I, and then there's other times I'm just a total clown, and I'm pretty good at that too. Well, I'm not good at it, but it just happens. Yeah. So yeah. I guess it's like I love catchy bits and I love hooks in songs, and I feel like in a lot of ways with some of the things I'm doing, whether it's melodies or whatever, I'm kind of like I'm trying to zero in on the hook, and just be that thing like, what is going to make this listener go, F yes, like this is what I wanted to hear, and this I'm going to come back. I want to come back to it, And also, strangely enough, in some of the songs, we have like a nice little tasty morsel of a hook, like at some point, or maybe even in the middle of the song, and then you only get to hear it once, and then it's like, oh, now I have to play the song again to hear the thing again or whatever.
Definitely.
And I'm trying to. I guess a lot of times I'm trying to do that because I've complained to Angus about stuff like, say for example, and I apologize to people who've heard me say this 1,000 times, but like Zappa, say Frank Zappa, I'm like, I have nothing but respect and astonishment at what he did musically and otherwise, but when he's like, "Don't you eat that yellow snow? Don't you go with the Huskies?" It's like when he's doing it seems like kind of a jokey vocal. I'm just like, I'm like, I'm kind of losing interest, and that's just my taste. But and not to say that I'm right in that, because but anyway, so like there's a lot of times, I'm not trying to. I don't know. I guess this is probably the most songs where it's just kind of, it seems like as far as songs go, even though it's not like I'm being a clown on the rest of the Umlaut stuff. A lot of the sort of recent stuff has been kind of emotional or seemingly sort of serious or something. But yeah, that particular track, the Tarnished Legacy, kind of like, I'm like, what even is this? Because it seemed like it's sort of an oddball in the album listing. And then Shane, the bass player, was like, he's like, yeah, let's just have it be the first track. It's the first, just out of the gate, just get the weirdness out of the way or something, or the strange one out. So that sort of was the thinking there. And I was like, all right, maybe that's the way to go, even though I would have buried that song a little bit later in the running of it, so people kind of sort of surprised them, and then they're like, I like that, because a lot of times you have like 10-track album, the 8th song or the 7th song are kind of the throwaway ones.
Yeah.
it's like the filler or something. So yeah, no, that's awesome that you were like listening to those and like kind of really vibing on those. So that's cool.
Yeah, there's a couple of
makes me
things.
happy.
Good. There's a couple of things out from what you said that I wanted to sort of to go into in more depth. So just in terms of the Tarnished Legacy and that almost being kind of like an afterthought of where to put it, for me, listening to the album as a whole, having that at the start and having the refrain about it took me a long time to forgive you, and that's now it's all I ever do. And then when you get to STFU and it's about now it's got, but it's like I only, what was it that it's about saying sorry as well.
Yeah, I overused the word sorry.
Yeah.
Now it's lost its meaning.
Now it's lost its meaning. So to me, it's almost like it's a nice circle that it comes round to that. It's like it's not clear who the people are, but they felt like they were sort of connected. So it was kind of like this nice arc.
Yeah.
That
absolutely, yeah. And then it's like I like the idea of of a lyric. It's like people asking about, like, I was just talking to a good friend recently about like the idea of doing an interview about an album or talking about the music, and I mean, I know this is maybe even as well a cliche. It's like the idea of like, once you've recorded a thing or made a thing and then it's out in the world, it's like it's not yours anymore. And it's kind of like, and insofar as like if I feel a certain way about a thing, or I'm like, oh, it wasn't blah blah blah, or I wanted it to be another thing, or da da da, it's like it's got nothing to do with it. It's like it's whatever the listener feels about it is what it is. It's sort of like, and the way I realize this, I love the idea also with music where it's like you're listening to a song and you're like, I don't know, it really speaks to me, or like it really resonates, It's like, so the idea that like we go around and we're all kind of in our own little like vessels, these bodies, and we're having these experiences and things, and there's this feel like it's a unique thing, and like I only everybody has their own struggles and the different things they're going through, but in a lot of ways the real revelation is when we hear like our experience coming through another person's mouth, and we go, oh wow, and then suddenly it realized like, wait, maybe there's more things that we actually share and we're vibing on, and it's like instead of this being this separation of like everybody's unique and everybody's having their own things, which is also true. I'm not trying to diminish that, but it's just more the idea that like the feeling or the inclusivity of like of kind of general kind of language, and then if you hear a thing and then it's resonating with you and you're like, and then you think about it and it reminds you of a thing a person has gone through. I love that kind of overlay, and that universality, even though it's more of a global thing. It's not really so much about, the universe. I don't know. We are sort of stardust looking back and thinking about ourselves. But yeah, so it's like so there's all those things in it, but it's like the serious kind of side of it. It's just like, sometimes I love the idea of, and I'm still trying to get to it and do it more as well. It's just like, it's just because we've all heard those artists or a musician or a song or some kind of thing where we're just like, it just sort of hits you and you're like, wow, oh my God, like that's either something that I've gone through or whatever, or that it's real, it's just like,
yeah,
it's like, and that was really sort of like has been a theme in recent years as far as like the songs I write. It's like, because I'm not really so much of a storyteller really, but it's like the real emotions that I can kind of get into the music and whatever. I love that kind of thing because it's all too easy for me to just be a clown and joke around, and I do that most of the time anyway. It's just like, to the point where people are like, you're always joking around, why can't you be serious about a thing? I remember somebody criticizing that, and I'm like, I'm just nervous, and I'm if I laugh, it's when I'm under a certain amount of stress. It's like if I'm having a bad confrontation or interaction with a coworker or whatever, it's like I might laugh, and it's like it's not really that I'm mocking the person, although that might be in there a little bit, but it's more that I'm incredibly nervous, and uncomfortable in a thing, and it's sort of like this release, but yeah, just like I love that those songs spoke to you and that you kind of those resonated with you, and because it's like when I really think about the overall the Umlaut kind of like whatever the arc of it or what it used to be when it started out and to what it's become now, it's just like I said in some other interview that it was like the one good thing about the pandemic was that there was no FOMO insofar as like I remember it was that thing, I had this thing was like, oh wow, every touring musician that I could be looking at going like, oh God, I wish I could be doing that. Oh, I'd love to be doing that. And just like flopping around on some stage somewhere. And then I'm like, oh wait, nobody's doing anything right now. It's like,
Yep.
and I was like, wow. And it was just this kind of calming kind of like thing for me. And that's maybe that, maybe that's petty or any number of things on some level. But I'm like, that's okay. That's all I was going to say about that.
Right.
I gotta learn how to stop.
Bear, for myself, I'm one for going on tangents, and I think you've said at least three things there that I want to reference back to. Let's see if I can manage to do it. First of all, in terms of what you're saying about that kind of like individual experience of music, and then that sort of, you know, the global perspective, the universality. I remember just having a conversation with another musician a while ago, and I was sort of asking her, why is it that I'll listen to bands like Today Is the Day, for example, who are like really extreme. The music's really intense. It's often very kind of violent and hateful. And I listen to that music and it like kind of makes me feel warm inside. And she said basically, well, it's because you can relate to it. It's like you feel that person feels something that you feel and there's a connection there. So I guess that was kind of, it seems in a way like a sort of an obvious thing, but it's like you don't think about it until someone points it out necessarily, that like, yeah, it doesn't necessarily matter what the mood is, but it's like if you feel something and you go, oh, that other person understands me in a way, even if they've never met me, that can be a very powerful thing. And I think with the latest record, I think part of what's kind of like emotionally satisfying is that there is the playfulness and there is the absurdity in amongst all of that. You can hear the sincerity as the listener, and you have these like very rousing kind of anthemic moments, but also to your point, you don't necessarily stick with them for as long as the listener might expect. It's not like when you've got a song on the radio and you go like, oh, okay, so like now the verse part's done, now we're going to have the chorus, and now we're going to go into this bit and this bit. Like you've got the elements that are emotionally resonating, but how long they're going to be there for or where they're going to appear is uncertain. And that's kind of part of the fun of the album. It's like, whoa, I wasn't expecting, like in the track Cold Sore, for example, like the fact that you've called it Cold Sore, it makes it sound so kind of incidental, but that ended up for me being one of the most emotive tracks. And think it was even in, it wasn't like a vocal part of that. I think it was something to do with, I forget exactly what the instrumentation was, but there was like a break that came in the middle of the song. And I was like, wow, that really like, I really feel that one. So that kind of
that's cool
emotion, but also the surprise of it. Yeah, I think is really nice. It's kind of like part of what makes the album so charming.
Thanks. Yeah, it's and even that was since that was kind of a kind of one that I wasn't sure if we were gonna have in there as well. Like Angus was really pushing for us to include that one, because I was just like, I don't know, it's sort of an old track, and but it's an interesting one. Like it's it's a very old one, but I'm like, that was really Angus's kind of like work as far as like that's on Angus, I think, in a lot of ways, and Shane as well, for sort of really lobbying to include that one on the album, because it's kind of like a little bit of a time capsule from the 90s. But yeah, that's really cool. I guess it's always that thing where I keep coming back to this thing where you make a thing and I've got all kind of opinions about like whether a thing might be too too standard or a little generic or this or that, and then it's like, but it doesn't. But it's kind of like when you said there's a certain emotion that comes through it, and you're like, it might be a very violent or kind of intense thing, but you're like, oh, that kind of calms me down. It's like I've had those same feelings like listening to some black metal or some kind of thing, where like this band Weakling from back in the 90s was kind of a metal kind of like band like Emperor and back in the day, and it's like how could that be where you have this kind of like chaotic, like a very intense thing, and it's like I think it probably speaks to something to do with probably some Jungian kind of like thing where like the shadow side of like, we go around, we're trying to be nice people, we're trying to be functional, we're trying to be not assholes or whatever, in life as people and in society and whatever. And then, and meanwhile, there's this kind of simmering kind of like, I don't know. It's not even a simmering thing. It's just like, it's like the light and the dark, you need the light to have the dark. You need the dark to have the lightness and that kind of thing. And it's like, it's never just like all happy and rainbows all the time and just perfect kind of things. It's like, just if we're honest about, you know, feeling a certain way, and even amongst like our most benevolent and kind of like good natured kind of, you know, urges or whatever, behaviors, like there's you know, it's just anyway, it's just, this is all very, I don't know, it's all cystic maybe or something, but yeah, I think it's all part of it. And it's just the contrast, you know, it's like, it's the brutal sections of a song that make the gentle parts of a song, you know, sound nicer, and vice versa, and all these kinds of things. But yeah, I don't know. I think even like with with one of these old Umlaut songs that we did, a Secret Disposable Boyfriend, which is like, it's basically like a suicide fantasy, you know. And it was just like, it was a breakup song, but it has like, but the narrative of the vocal and the lyrics is like, it's the girlfriend saying it to the you know, the soon to be ex-boyfriend, some of the lines, and then it's other times it's just you know, the boyfriend like in his head thinking about things, and then other lines. And so it's kind of, it's unclear like who the narrator, so to speak, is in that song. And I like playing with those kind of themes a little bit as well, where it's just like, wait, and then you're like, but it's just never really come up in interviews where we're like, hey, is that just one viewpoint in that song, or is it something the other person said, or the, you know, the yeah. So it's just like, it's kind of fun to kind of have those options and realize that there's no real rules. I mean, things can be complete messes, and it's up to the listener to decide, and you know, what a thing is, if it's trash, or if it's great or whatever. But
well, that
yeah,
point about,
yeah,
that point about the different perspectives, I think, goes back to kind of what you were touching on before, that, you know, if we listen to a piece of music, you can listen to some lyrics and you can interpret them for yourself, and they can have some special meaning to yourself. And then I think sometimes if you actually, and I guess this is why a lot of the time artists don't really want to say too much about what they meant, because it can spoil it for the listener. It's like you have this idea for yourself, and the listener says like, oh, the songwriter says like, oh, well, it was about when my mum broke her foot, and you're like, that's not what I thought the song was about. So sometimes
and it ruins it.
Yeah. So to have that what you're describing, where it's like actually the person talking can be different. Because I think that was also a thing. I mean, you brought them up, so I'll bring them back up again. Like with Faith No More, like possibly my favorite Faith No More album is King for a Day, Fall for a Lifetime. And one of the things I really like about that is that it seems to me that with some of the songs, the way Mike Patton's singing, it's like he'll be going between two different characters, but he doesn't make it obvious. And so you're listening to that and you're just kind of like, oh, I've got this whole world, but it's not really fed to me like this is the one person and this is the other person. And that's kind of effective.
Yeah, that's really, that's a good point. I think I've had that a few times listening to his songs where, and again, you know, people forgive me for this, but there's been moments where I've heard him like a line in a song and I'm like, oh shit, is he talking about me? And again, I know that's so like, you know, that's like, oh my God, it's like, make it all about yourself kind of thing. And that's what my ego does really well, everybody. No, it's, you know, but I've had those moments listening to some of that music where I'm like, well, who the hell is he talking about in this thing? And then, yeah, it's a fascinating kind of thing to kind of, you know, to roll around in your head with, you know, and it's, but you know, so yeah, I was just, like I said, I was having that conversation with this friend, and we were sort of like, and it really came back to that thing of like, and again, I understand people, maybe, you know, lesser interviewers might be like, so tell me about the album. What's the album about? Whatever. And you just go like, you could literally say anything, but it's, you know, and then they'd be like, whoa, oh, he said it was about this thing. It's like, and then you go, well, were they just pulling my leg the whole time or whatever? Were they being sort of earnest about it? And then not knowing if a person's just trying to be mysterious or if they're just insane or whatever, or all of the above. But, I have a problem, a seeming problem, like of just trying to. I'm too confessional with a lot of these things. Like somebody will just ask me a thing, and I'll be like, you know, I'll be like, oh, finally somebody asked me what my little breakup song was about, and then they go into the details, and then it's like, and maybe it's lessening it on some level, but yeah, you know, it's sort of a fun thing to do, and then it's fun to sort of leave these little, or have these phrases, like certainly in Bumblebee Shoes, there's a lot of lines in it, and then even somebody could be like, what the hell is this about? You know, and then I'm just like, oh, finally, you know, but also it's fine if nobody does. But it's like, there's a lot of times when
I'd love for someone to ask me, but if no one does, it's okay. I don't mind.
I don't know what there's a word for what it is I'm doing. It's cloying maybe or something. No, but it's like, but I do have times when I'm a little bit self-aware of like, oh, this line is going to confuse somebody, and they'll be like, what the hell is he talking about, you know? And then I'm kind of like, I'm just sort of waiting for the inevitable, or hopefully inevitable question if people are that interested or care or whatever, and I can. But again, it's interesting that you bring up that point, you know, that sometimes that might ruin the mystery of a thing, and sometimes it's the mystery, you know, that is the whole point. So I'm not that mysterious. Other than somebody going like, why is he so whatever the way he is or whatever, and then maybe it's a little more interesting, but it's also boring. But anyway, yeah.
Well, I am going to delve into that a little bit, but I'm going to do this in a very long-winded way, which is often my style as well, because I wanted to mention, first of all, we have some incidental connections. So you're currently living in Melbourne, right?
Yeah.
So I was born in Melbourne.
Oh, what?
And also your mother, I think, was German, right? She was from Hamburg, is that correct?
I think it was Stuttgart or yeah,
okay.
or maybe Frankfurt. I'm not sure. One of those two. I'd have to check with my sisters.
Okay, well, this is a little bit more tenuous, but I lived in Germany for a few years. So I lived in Dusseldorf, and then I lived in Berlin. And I have no California connection, but I have interviewed Nate Goyer. And Nate Goyer has interviewed you at least twice. And I've actually met Nate Goyer because I interviewed him when I was living in Germany. And he said to me at the end, he was like, oh, you know, if you're ever in Sydney, come and say hi. And I'm like, well, the funny thing is, I'm actually going to be in Sydney in 2 months' time because I'm visiting family. So I ended up meeting Nate and going to various record stores with him. And I love Nate. I love his podcast, The Vinyl Guide. And one of the things, which is kind of going back to about your lyrics, when I was listening again to one of the interviews with you, you were talking about at that point, I forget exactly when it was, I think it was about maybe 2020, you were talking about doing some instrumental music with Umlaut and the kind of self-consciousness of thinking, are people going to think that because I don't have lyrics that it's like it's something less because it's instrumental? And, you know, there was a fair bit of the conversation where you were sort of talking about the value of music being instrumental, which I totally agree with. I think there's lots of great instrumental music. But I found it interesting to be listening to that and then also listening to this album alongside it, where it feels like the vocal melodies and some of the lines are so impactful that to me it's kind of amazing to have heard you speaking just before saying like, oh, I don't really feel very comfortable making lyrics when you're doing it so well. So
thanks.
Do you, like you sort of mentioned, you've touched on a couple of times since you've been talking that this felt like a bit of a departure for you. So was there something in particular or particular factors that led towards you focusing on these very kind of memorable vocal hooks that you do have this time around?
Well, I don't know. I think there was some relationship drama that I'd had around 2017. That sort of cracked me open in it's kind of like it's like people have to kind of hit a certain kind of bottom, I think, in a way to before they sort of wake up. You know? And there was I don't know, and it's without getting too nitty gritty or whatever, it's like I feel like there was some kind of download or something that came through, or it was just like the horror of this thing that happened with this person, this relationship, and the disintegration of it was so sort of wrenching. But I don't know. I guess like that was certainly something that was there. But there was I don't know if that's the whole thing, the whole story.
But would you say that like at that time, was that in a way kind of like an inhibiting factor? Like you didn't really have the perspective to be able to write songs about it. Whereas now that there's more distance, that maybe you're able to sort of express some of these experiences vocally because you're not like so close to it anymore.
Maybe. I guess it's like when I'm trying to, because I think both of those songs, this is kind of a funny thing. Both of those songs were kind of like workshopped on commutes in my car. So like it's sort of like belting a thing out and like belting like a melody that's coming through out, or just kind of like riffing on a phrase or an idea, and then finding like the lyric that goes to it, or even starting from like a phrase and then like kind of like just kind of churning it over and over again until I kind of hit like a hook or a melody. What is it? STFU.
I presume
See, so
that stands
song,
for what I think it stands for.
yeah, and somebody could say like, what is that? That's not everything. That's not in the lyric of the song or whatever. And it's like it's kind of like it's like my future self talk to my past self of like of a way of how to have better coped with the situation. And coming from such a verbose person as myself, it's sort of like it's like if I had just EFU'd or something on some level. But it's like that song was that lyric was also a came out of like this theme that I keep talking to Angus and people about, and when we're talking about mixing, I'm like, it's about addition through subtraction. And so that by that I mean, like, you know, on say the very first Umlaut album, it was like it's very overcooked and it's like all the ideas are in there. It's like we kept going and there was no kind of like, well, does the music breathe? Like not until recent years did I sort of have that idea in my head, like, oh, the music should breathe. It's just like what we're talking about, light and dark, and it's just like there has to be, you know, some kind of background for the thing to be seen or whatever, you know. It's like and that lyric, it used to be like, I overused the word sorry, now it's lost its meaning. I overused the word sorry, now it is, and but the melody used to be this like and I basically was like, I gotta just chop off the end of that, because it's like boom, and just chop that sucker off so like the listener can go, whoa, like they can catch up with it and then be like, oh my God. Because it's like, and it was like by chopping off fat of it or whatever, it was what made, suddenly it was just like, oh, look at that. Oh my God. Suddenly I have gold sitting right there. And it was like, and that was a real kind of thing of like, it's what you take out of the music that makes it pop or whatever. It's never kind of like, oh, what is it? What other thing do we need to throw in? It's like, you know, I know cooking is a very, you know, often used kind of like analogy or something, but it's like, you know, it's like you put too much salt in the thing and then you can't get the salt out. So that the metaphor doesn't quite work, but it's like, yeah, it is that thing where it's kind of like, there's something magical in that where you could go, okay, I think I've got the beginning of something good. And you're just like, you got the thing and it's all connecting. And it's like, wow, it's this nice long melody and whatever. And then it's just like, okay, but it's not, the hook is not being revealed. So it's like, what do I have to take out? And it was so, and the brilliant thing about that is that if you're doing that song live or whatever, it gives you actually time to get a breath.
Yep.
And so it's, whereas in the past, I'm always like, you know, you think more is more. And it's again, I know less is more. We all have heard that since time immemorial, but it's like, it was really true. And I love that. And then even in a mixing sense, like there used to be the saxophone part that went over the middle of the Grumpy Library, where sort of like after the singing stops and then it kind of goes into this thing where it's just sort of like an instrumental break in a way. But I'd spent 2 days putting the saxophone line on this thing. And then Angus was like, nah, it doesn't work. And I was like, you know, it was just like, and part of me was like, but I spent 2 days doing the thing. But it was just that kind of thing of going like, no, he's right. It doesn't need it. And I'm going to listen to his intuition on this and we're going to go with it. And then I eventually forget what the saxophone part was that I thought was so precious and needed to be there. So again, it was another thing of like, yeah, what needs to go, because this isn't breathing and the hook isn't really there. So even as well with the Tarnished Legacy, it was a similar thing where it was like, yeah, the other thing I was going to say is like a lot of times I'll find like a phrase with a melody and then it'll kind of repeat a lot, and you know, sometimes to not great effect, and I would go guilty, you know, but I kind of realized recently, like one of the bands that I was getting sort of marinated in as a little kid was the band Cheap Trick. And I was listening to some Cheap Trick from whatever, the late 70s, early 80s kind of stuff. And I was like, oh my God, this is where I get this thing. They'll take this like, I want, you want me or whatever. And then they just like, and it just keeps going on. And they're just like taking that thing and just kind of moving it along. And then it's like, and then there's some other little words, but he he, back in the day, this guy in Cheap Trick, was also a terrible lyricist in a way. And it gave me all this permission to be like, oh, see, look, this is where I get it. I can blame it on this guy, where it's like he's just taking a phrase and repeating it over and over again. And maybe on some level it hooks into a person's brain and it's easier to remember. Like a person like David Byrne said, like famously or something, he said, like, if you wear the same outfit all the time, people remember you more easily because whatever. So it's like, you're sort of like,
he's the guy that wears that hat.
Yeah. It's just like, or whatever. It's just like, and you're just like, and hopefully it's not the worst kind of outfit or hat or whatever, but you're like, it gives you permission to be a lazy guy. Like, I don't know, I'll just put this on. And it's like you always wear this, like whatever. And yeah, if it's a memorable thing, then it could be good. But I really do try to live by that addition by subtraction, where it's just like, because I mean, we have these digital workstations where it's like you can have so many tracks and you can just keep throwing another thing on top of another thing, and then it's just mud or whatever. And hopefully we didn't do too much of that. But
that is a really good point. Yeah, like I think I forget if this was there's probably so many times where people attribute quotes to Mark Twain, they weren't actually Mark Twain, but was it Mark Twain that said that one of the main things about editing is you've got to be prepared to chop out your favorite sentence. So it's
wow. Yeah.
It's like,
I love Mark Twain. So yeah.
Like with the thing that you were saying about the saxophone, you can have something you go, this is amazing, I want this to be in it. But if it doesn't serve the piece as a whole, you've got to have that ability to be able to say, this just isn't working within the context of everything else. And I guess that kind of principle of subtraction, a lot of the time it comes to like, I don't want to get rid of this thing, I like it. Yeah, but the thing as a whole is maybe going to be better if you take it away and you leave something to the imagination.
One of my favorite authors is Charles Bukowski. And it was almost like reading his stuff. And I was drinking a lot at that point in time. This is like, I don't know. It kind of goes with it. Yeah, like 15, 20 years ago or whatever. And it was just like meditative about it or whatever. It was just like like Zen poetry, where it's just like the shortest sentence is like, she walked into the room, she set down her drink. It's just like 3-word sentences or whatever. And it's like, I always think like, also with my writing, if I'm writing like a letter or a thing or usually if I'm typing like some kind of thing, it's like it's always that same game comes up. I'm like, okay, what do I need to take out? Are there words that are just cluttering the idea here, and can I get rid of them, kind of thing. So again, I fancy that I would be a good editor or proofreader on some level, where I would just be like, yeah, you don't need all this kind of like florid, Proustian language. I mean, sometimes you do, but yeah, I love that idea of like, sometimes you have to throw away your favorite thing, it's just like, because there's also something that feels like, you can almost kind of like pat yourself on the back in a way, just be like, yeah, I made some sacrifices for this. And you have, and if a person gets like whatever the interview or the conversation later, like, you have no idea the genius that I took out of that thing so that it would work or whatever. And the people are going, what? And then it's like the person kind of patting themselves on the back of like the sacrifices they made. And it's literally just like they took out something that they thought was so brilliant that maybe might not have been so brilliant. But yeah, that's an interesting thing. And it in a lot of ways is a good practice. Like I'm nowhere near it, and I aspire to do it, is to just watch my thoughts more instead of just like commenting on things like all the time. Like my fiance said, like I sometimes I'll have like complete conversations in my head, or short conversations, hopefully in my head, where I'm like, oh, I could have pointed this thing out, but she would have been, maybe annoyed by it, or it's just like, what are you talking about now? And it's just like, she might be, multitasking or something already, and it's that thing where I'm just like, and then I'll later go, wow, I noticed all these comments and I managed not to say them, because I can be pretty annoying, I think, at the best of times. So yeah, that's also a fun exercise. I think it's a good practice, especially for me, and because I feel like I've said to people, I said, one day it's just gonna be like a vow of silence, because I finally realized, like, it goes back to the STFU thing. It's just like, and it's part of that thing of like, I overuse the word, and it's like, and it's not like I'm meant to be a threat of like, one day I'm going to take a vow of silence and you guys are going to be like, please just talk to us, something, say this. It's going to be like, no, and you'll be better for it. And it's not like a cry for help or despair even. It's going to be like, no, it's going to be that on some level, I'm just going to have kind of finally, because you kind of leveled down to where I'm not just this kind of manic mess all the time,
I had a very interesting...
It's aspirational, so I can dream.
You reminded me of a little incidental situation I had once. So when I was doing philosophy and at university, and I was always one of those people who, if there was a tutorial class, like I always was like happy to talk constantly. Like I don't, it wasn't like I was sort of, I'd like to think I wasn't kind of like overtaking the space or overrunning the space, but like if I'm asked for my opinion, I'll definitely give it. And I realized that this was like my style, that I'm sort of like always expected to be on hand to talk. And so there was one day where I came into the tutorial and there was like half a dozen of us. And I thought, you know what? Consciously, I'm going to get through this whole thing and I'm going to say nothing. And I got through the whole thing and I just didn't say anything. And at the very end, the lecturer said, "Are you okay?" I was like, validated. I was correct about my assessments of myself.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I was recently in the lunchroom with some coworker, and he was kind of like sympathetic to a certain political person's thing, and I was just like, really, and I was getting more and more angry, agitated and angry, and I was like, man, this is, and then I sort of was realizing like this guy is sort of my spiritual teacher, where I have to learn how to sort of coexist and accept that, like, whatever, on some level, and then also I just don't have to engage in the thing, it's like, I mean, and any idiot can say, yeah, you shouldn't be talking about like politics and religion at work anyway. It's gonna light up.
It's one thing to
quick.
Say it as advice, but it's another thing in the situation.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So and again, it's like, and it's a challenge. I mean, it's an aspiration of mine, is to be able to kind of just be like, huh, or even, if I'm going to push back at all, if I'm going to bother, just be like, you sure about that? Just like, and stopping there and not like expecting them to kind of like, yeah, whatever. I think my AirPods are just about to die. Sorry.
I aspire to that a little bit, the more Socratic approach of like getting the person to ask the question rather than imposing my view, but it's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
Eagle-eyed viewers will just notice that suddenly the earpods changed. Like, what happened there? So I just wanted to ask you like a couple more questions about the album. So, well, actually, no. Before I enter, there's one Bungle-related question I want to ask you. So, from my understanding, the split of Bungle at the time that it happened was kind of acrimonious, and it didn't end well. Just for you on a personal level, from that point, because I understand that there were songs that you'd written or that you were working on that you kind of like had this idea they were going to be for the next Bungle album as it was planned. I know for myself personally, it's like being involved in some kind of artistic project, when you invest a lot of time and energy into it and then it ends, it can be quite hard to motivate yourself to then go like, okay, I have to accept that's done and I've got to move on and start something else afresh. What do you sort of remember? Like, what was it like going from, I'm in Mr. Bungle and now it's like, right, okay, had these plans and now it's done, to being able to step away from it and go, I'm going to start something different. What was that transition process like for you? Were you reading a lot of Bukowski?
Yeah, maybe I was. Yeah, I think that was around the Bukowski days, a lot of the Bukowski stuff. But and maybe I was drinking, more kind of regularly then. But I don't know. I guess a lot of the Mr. Bungle time was spent kind of waiting around for people to come off of tours with their other band and stuff. And so there was a lot of downtime. So it was kind of like, it was more of an unceremonious kind of just like fizzling out that happened around 2004. And then also I was, we had two young children at the time. So we were just sort of like, doing it rough with, as a struggling young family, at that time. Like the kids would have been like, 4 and 3 also around that time. So we were sort of busy doing, like surviving as a little family, young family. It's like we got Mike on Atlas Face, like he was kind enough to sort of like contribute his talents to that, and that was really cool, and that really sort of put us even more on the map with that song. So there was something kind of like that was like a, what do you call it? I don't know.
An
consolation prize. Yeah. An olive branch, or sort of a consolation prize or something. But it just felt like because of being, like a young parent at that time, like I had all I had was like this little keyboard with like an inbuilt 6-track and I was like, it was just like a very creative time for me, where it was just like, there was no pressure of like, we got to come up with some ideas and put it towards an album and this and that. So it was just like a very kind of like I don't know, halcyon days of like, just like, our two young kids, and then just having a lot of time. I kind of really only figured out how to write music and like properly. And it was like a real kind of like fertile time for me, like just in the time after the last California tour, and then up through, 2007. It was just like a very, just I had just like all these archives of ideas that were sort of coming through, and I was just sort of hoping that, like I was really excited, because I was like, wow, I can, all these ideas that I can hear like a lot of potential in, we'll be able to put it towards the next Mr. Bungle thing. Whereas like in the past, it wasn't as, I didn't have as many ideas to sort of contribute there. But yeah, maybe ask more about that. Like, how do you mean, like, how the transition you were saying about, like?
Well, yeah, just like to go from like, I think if I've understood well from other interviews with you, that there were songs that you had written for Mr. Bungle that you ended up releasing as Umlaut tracks. So was it kind of like, it sounds like from what you're saying, if things fizzled out in 2004, that's when you released the first Umlaut record, right? So
I think it was a little bit later. It was around 2000. I think it was 2008 or 9.
Okay, right. It was actually
like
a fair bit later.
The first album, yeah. But I was like, I guess it's like the real point is this, that like all the music that I was ever coming up with was like, I was in such a fortunate position, such a lucky position to have like met those guys at university in the late 80s, when Mike had just like joined Faith No More, I think at the time. And it was so I kind of like just stumbled into meeting these guys. It was such a, it wasn't like they were going like, yeah, we've got auditions for horn players and we need to, and then this guy won the spot or something. It was just sort of like, they knew I could play, drums and saxophone and whatever, and they needed a horn player. And then they just sort of phased me in, or asked me to, and I was just like, I'll give it a try, kind of thing. Cause I was actually in a jazz quartet with Trevor and Trey. When I first met them, I was actually playing drums and Trevor and Trey guitar, bass. And then there was a guy on trumpet or something. And, so that's sort of a strange thing that they sort of met me as a drummer. Because I was playing, I don't know, it's just a strange thing, but I was so fortunate to try to get back to the point, is like, to have met them, that I like, it wasn't lost on me that this was like, it was just like a once in a lifetime. Like, I mean, Mike Patton is just like, we all know, like we've heard it, that the incredible, things the guy can do. And so it was just like, what? And then like Trevor and Trey were both amazing musicians as well. Danny, of course, so it was just like, what? And then I was just kind of looking around, like I didn't really go towards this or ask for this. I just kind of like happened into it. And that maybe that'll make a lot of really, really amazing musicians out there really angry. Like, what, this asshole over here just like, here I am. And I mean, crazier things have happened with other kind of like legendary bands or whatever. But so my point is, I'm trying to get this last thing is that like any music I was ever doing ever was always going to be like, if it can be used by these guys and utilized. I mean, I think Mike kind of like cannibalized some of my ideas and got them into Air Conditioned Nightmare, and then took another of my ideas and got into Goodbye Sober Day. It's like, and I couldn't be more happy. It was like there was a larger composition or something, and he was like, no, I like this bit. I'm just gonna like take it and just grab this section of a thing that I think is good and put it into something he's working on. And that's how that kind of went. And so, and I couldn't be happier. I'm like, yeah, please just like, pillage any ideas that you hear that have any kind of use to you, and to something you're trying to do, because I still look up to these guys so much, and don't feel worthy, to be in the same company of them as once upon a time. It's funny. It's like you were mentioning at the beginning of this interview, like, so Umlaut has been around longer than Mr. Like, I've actually had moments where I thought like, okay, we got here in like 2002. And so now it's, 2025. And I had this moment where I was like, oh, wow. And I only stayed in my hometown until I was like, whatever, 18 or 17 and a half or something, 18. And so I've actually lived in this town longer than my hometown. So I'm like, where is my true home? You sort of go like, but it's the formative thing. And then, right. And you have these kind of like, these, whatever, the memories and the narrative and the story of identity around that and whatever, and growing up in a place. And we feel some kind of like kinship to that. But it's like, it's a strange thing to do when you start doing these little math kind of things about like, well, you've actually been doing this other thing longer than this other thing, and then this other thing eclipses it, or but it's like, Mr. Bungle still put me on the map, and people only know me from that. And and again, it's nothing to be ashamed of, or this or that or the other things. It's like I felt extremely fortunate to have had that. And then and then we'll see. But it's like, yeah, so I guess it's just the thing. It's never like some people can go like, yeah, I'm writing some music for this one group that I have, and I've got some other music that's for this other group that I have, and I got some other. I'm like, no, I'm like, no, any ideas that you're like, Bär, that's for the. I'm like, boom, it's straight to the Mr. Bungle thing. It's just like, and all these people that have been standing by my side here in Australia for 20 years, I'm like, it's just like, hey, come on, But it's like, it's because I hold these guys in high regard. Not that I don't hold these local guys in high regard also, but it's just like, it's sort of like, I don't know. It's like things like the Tarnished Legacy or STFU. It's just like, in a perfect world, I would have said, here you go, Mr. Bungle, let's do this thing, But then, meanwhile, you're just the years sort of tick by and other things happen, so you're just like, no, we'll just do it.
No, I think that's a really important insight, because, like, as you say, it was a different kind of dynamic, and the Mr. Bungle experience is something, as you say, you weren't looking for it; it just came to you, and it was this amazing thing that opened doors for you. And yes, disappointing that it fizzled out the way that it did, but that you were then kind of like, oh, well, now I'm not in the position that I was before. Now I've had these experiences. I've been to play in these places. I've had this recording experience. I've got my own music. And now I can be sort of like the leader. I don't know if you want to call yourself the band leader, but I can kind of like lead a project and go like, this is now what I'm going to do. So I can see there would be an empowering side potentially to that as well.
Yeah, it's like I think even in the early days in 2003, maybe around thereabouts. I mean, it's just wild to even say that, because then you think like, where if I said something like around 20 years prior, when I was 18, it was just like, what? I wasn't even here yet. Or even when I was 25, thinking of the 20 years ago, it's just like, that's ancient. Anyway, and it is, but whatever. Time doesn't exist. But on some level, it's like, I think I was doing some, just working up my little ideas, and I hadn't like put it into like a band form. I hadn't really had nothing that was really kicking off yet. And somebody locally here, I think is Dan Toner. We'll do a little shout out to Dan Toner. He's a good friend. One of the first people I met when we got here. He was like, yeah, you need to get a band. You need to make a band. And again, it's a hard thing. It's like, it's not that if I mean, not that people didn't know who I was, but it's just like, it's a lot of scheduling, and you're just like, you feel like, does everybody have the time to do the thing around this thing? And it's just a lot of organizing and scheduling, and it's really time consuming. And then you've got the personalities, and then it's like, can you interact with other people well enough to make them play your music for little or no, most of the time it's been no money, and it's just like, what is their motivation? What is their incentive? And you just like, can you be that charming person, or is the music good enough, or whatever? But ultimately to have a band is a lot of work. And sometimes it's you're kind of like, I'm not even going to bother. And, we all know that there's plenty of amazing musicians out there who just like do entire albums and then put them out of them playing all the instruments, and they just can't be bothered. And it's because it's easier to actually do that in a lot of ways, just instead of like arguing with guitar player about like a part or this or that or arrangement. And it's just like, you just kind of go, oh man, I'm done fighting for this thing so much, and I'm just going to do it a certain way on my own. So I think I'm kind of also a control freak in a lot of ways. But I think notably with this most recent album, I was less of a control freak than I've been in the past. And, like Angus has got his fingerprints all over this, the guitar player, and then Danny as well with a lot of his ideas, and Shane certainly as well. So it's like, and then me kind of like being able to swallow that pride, or it's not really a pride swallowing, but it's more kind of like letting other people, I don't know. It's weird. It's just like, because and we usually say like the best idea wins or whatever. But this particular album is kind of notable, mostly for Danny's involvement, but also because of how much I didn't completely like hermetically or obsessively control every, like aspect of it. Yeah. As far as like certainly the arrangements and the orchestrations and things like that, and some of the mix kind of ideas too, but because Angus and me, we're both kind of loudmouths. I mean, just beyond, we can be really horrible and loud and sometimes in a good way, but a lot of times a really terrible way. And so because we're so similar, there's a lot of headbutting and whatever. But I tried to kind of yield more and kind of like go, try to just kind of go like maybe, just aspire to kind of accept Angus's production ideas a little bit more and let him kind of go to run with like a lot of these creative kind of like reamping ideas that were done on the thing, and a lot of these really cool effects that come through are because of him. Yeah.
Well, I love the end result, and I don't want to suggest
Thanks,
that I don't want to suggest that the dilution of your personality gets a better result, but whatever the configuration was between the four of you that got the album to what it ended up being, I think it's great. So
thanks so much.
I hope it gets a great reception when it comes out. And Bär, it was an absolute delight to talk to you. Any time in the future that you have anything to promote, I would be delighted to talk to you again on any occasion, in any context.
Thanks so much, man.
It was a treat.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much.